Welcome to Spectrum Perspectives, real talk with parents, professionals, and autism advocates. With your host, Cindy Gellermini.
Hi, everyone. This is Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives. And today I have a mom on with me, Amanda Spagnoletti. How are you? Yay, Amanda, thank you for being here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, as I said, Amanda's a mom. How many kids do you have?
I have three.
Three. And then you have a son with autism, correct? What
Correct.
number is he in the birth order?
He's number three.
Oh, he's the third.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's the
Three.
youngest. Okay.
Yep.
And then, and how old is he?
He is 5, but he's going to be 6 in 2 weeks. Soon
Okay.
to be 6.
Okay. And then your older ones, boys or girls?
2 girls, and that actually
Wow.
plays in as we'll get there. But
Yes.
it's girl, boy, and they are 11 and 10. And
Okay.
like I said,
Oh, okay. So he's like 5 years younger as well. Okay. Yeah. You're that very similar with me. My girls were twins though, but then I waited 5 years and then I had Robbie. He's like 5 years younger than them. And then another like 5 years. And then I had my youngest one. So, but I kind of know where you're going with that because I thought that because Robbie was a boy, it's like, wow, he's very different than having girls. Right. All right. So let's back up. So during your pregnancy, were there any kind of red flags when you went for your OBGYN visits? Anything came up?
No, I all 3 times I had wonderful pregnancies. I had really easy, very, healthy full-term pregnancies. I used to joke that I should be a surrogate for people. I used to offer to be a surrogate for people because I loved pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I had great pregnancies. The only difference between my pregnancy with Nick and my pregnancy with the girls was that I didn't fully go into labor naturally with Nick. My water broke and I had to then be induced because it's not safe to not go into labor once your water breaks. So once my water broke on its own, they had to induce labor with Pitocin, which was the only difference.
Okay, right. And I had that with my youngest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then labor and delivery, any kind of issues?
No, nothing. It was smooth. He was a good size, he was 7 pounds, 4 ounces, a nice, healthy, but not too big baby. The only thing that I always think is a little bit important to point out about all of my children, but particularly my younger 2 children, was that they had quite small heads, very small heads, which made the delivery really easy for me. I was lucky. Very, very small heads though. It was a little alarming, especially with my middle one. We had to go for all these extra ultrasounds, I guess, ultrasounds, because they were concerned about the size of her head. And my son, not my middle one, my son, my Nick, the one who's autistic, was born during that Zika craze when everybody was worried about microcephaly. So his wasn't measuring quite as small in utero, but we were still I was a little concerned. And I was like wearing long sleeves and stuff to make sure I wasn't going to get eaten by any mosquitoes. But it was within it was right on the cusp. And then, I think at birth, he was like at the lowest, not at birth, but when he was at the lowest point, his head ranked in like the 3rd percentile. That was the only thing. Again, easy for birth, but not necessarily what you want to see. Especially on like a 90th percentile length baby, which is what he was. He's long and tiny little.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But it's worth mentioning because head size does matter in autism.
Yeah, interesting. Because I know after I had Robbie and he was diagnosed autistic, I had seen an article somewhere that they did autopsies on autistic people and their cerebellum was smaller. And so when I had my youngest one and they did the ultrasound, I said, check it, make sure that it's the right size, So, and I haven't heard that mentioned ever since. I don't know where I saw it, but anyway. So
you hear a lot about large heads in autism, but I think I read once that it's actually not to do with the absolute, don't quote me on this, I think it's not to do with the absolute volume, but it's about like the growth, the rate of growth in the first couple of years or something. So I don't know, but head size I know is something they're always asking about at all the thousands of doctor's appointments we've had. And so I don't know, but he did have a very small head.
So interesting. So, all right. So tell me about his development. Did he crawl on time, walk on time?
All of it. Well, in terms of the physical milestones, everything was right on time. And he really, in almost every way, he developed very typically for the first, almost completely typically for the first 2 years. The one exception is language. I mean, he was very kind of like, autism is a social and language disorder, right? He had the social component down. He was so connected. I used to brag about his eye contact. His eye contact was so good. And he was so like, just jokey and funny and like in on the jokes with everybody, just very engaged. But he was a little behind in terms of his language. So he hit all the other milestones. He crawled, he walked, he sat up, all of those things. But I remember that when he turned 2, which was right around the point we were starting to get diagnosed, he was supposed to have 50 words at 2, just like in order to kind of pass that hurdle. And he had 49. We counted them up. He had 49 words. So he was just under. And then, I mean, he had regressive autism, which I don't know if we're ready to talk about that yet, but he was just about to start his big regression right at this point. So we counted him up right around his 2nd birthday. He had 49, and like 6 weeks later, he had 5. He went from 49 to 5. He just lost him. But what was more jarring than the loss of his vocabulary was the loss of his understanding. And a big issue in our lives and what our whole world kind of revolves around is the distinction that very few people actually understand between expressive language and receptive language. And so Nick's biggest challenges really are in the receptive area. So he really has a very hard time understanding what people are saying to him, understanding language. And that's where he used to, like when he was developing in the first couple of years, he could understand things. He could follow 1-step commands and maybe even 2-step commands occasionally. He was understanding us much better. And then something happened, I don't know. And he really regressed.
So,
Yeah.
and did he start having tantrums then after that?
Not too soon after that, much later. And it was he really, in a lot of ways, doesn't fit the mold. So I was one of these like autism denying parents, you know, there's often the ones who are like, the doctors didn't believe me, but I knew from the moment he was 6 months old that there was something different about him. And I was kind of the opposite, where like, you know, my husband actually was like, he's not responding to his name. And I was like, he's fine. But I just couldn't really see it, partly because regression is very confusing, because I was still responding to the kid that I had seen, and he was fine. I was like, wait, there's nothing, what do you mean? Like, Nick's okay, he was doing all these things. But then I started to realize, but wait, when was the last time he smiled? When was the last time he laughed? Wait, hold on, you're right, he doesn't do these things. He did do these things, it's different. But he definitely, I was the one giving the pushback to, you know, doctors and evaluators and stuff, because I just felt like he wasn't checking off a lot of boxes, like the tantrums and like the rigidity. I used to just joke, he was so easygoing. And I was like, but he's the 3rd child. He has no choice. He has to come along for the ride when I take the girls to play dates or to ballet lessons or whatever. Like he was such an easygoing kid. He was so happy. He was so, you know, he was just like a bubbly, easy-spirited little guy. The tantrums set in at like 3.5 or so. But I mean, the key with Nick is, and I think this is pretty common in the autism world, is inconsistency. Things come in waves, they come, they go. It's just like waves crashing on a beach, or the tide coming in and going back out. I don't know. So sometimes he's a tantrum kid and sometimes he's not. Most of the time he's actually not. But his rigidity, which is a big issue in the autism world, again, that's just something that comes and goes. So tantrums are not a huge issue for us. No.
It's usually though because they can't express themselves, you know,
Right.
and it's usually because they're frustrated over language. You know.
Yeah,
does he bring you by the hand to things that he wants, or how does
sometimes? So Nick, so like I said, he does occasionally do the pulling by the hand. There's less of that with Nick than there is with some of the other kids that I've seen who have more severe autism, because what Nick, like I said, a big issue for Nick is the receptive language. Nick does have some expressive language, and most of it is you know, non-contextual. So it's kind of gibberish. Like he does a lot of scripting, which I know you understand what that means, but in case.
Go ahead, explain it.
Right. So scripting, or, you know, vocal stimming, some people call it, is when you just say words that are things that you've memorized from, like in Nick's case, there's one TV show he happens to really like a lot, or he likes to listen to music, so songs, he sings a lot of songs, and he just says these words that he's memorized from the show. He just repeats lines, but he doesn't understand their meaning, he just says them. So most of his vocalizations are that, so that's not really communication, that's just saying words. But it can sometimes it can be deceptive, because sometimes it looks almost contextual, so people will be like, well, why do you call him nonverbal, he's talking? I'm like, he doesn't know what the heck he's saying. So it doesn't really, it's not communication. But the one exception to that, where he does have functional communication, is expressing his wants and needs, or manding is what they call it in the ABA world.
Wait, what do they call it? That's a new
manding,
one.
Manding.
Okay.
Mand for things.
Okay.
So he sometimes will pull me by the hand if he doesn't know the words for the things that he wants, but most of the things that he wants in his world are things that he knows. He knows a lot of concrete nouns. Those are words he knows. And he knows the words I want. So he can say, I want water, I want milk, I want iPad, which is one we hear a lot.
Yeah.
I want phone.
Surprise.
I like candy, or I want mama,
What if you say no?
But see, this is where the tantrums come in. So
exactly,
our tantrums are not about, usually in Nick's case, they're not really mostly about a frustration over not being able, occasionally, but not being able to communicate his wants and needs. It's more about headbutting about, like, I want this, well, you can't have it, here we go, So there's a lot of that kind of tantruming, and I try to do that, like, parenting technique of say yes 90% of the time, and then when you say the 10%, when you say no, you really mean it. And I try to do that, but I always joke that, like, all of those, like, parenting books and parenting techniques that apply to neurotypical kids, you can just throw those in the garbage.
Exactly.
When you're dealing with
exactly, it's the exact opposite. Yeah.
Right. None of it really applies. So yeah, so we do our best, but, like, you can't always have the iPad, you can't always have the candy. So we have our moments, but so this is what the reason, again, I was so skeptical about the diagnosis for so long. He's just like, he doesn't check a lot of those boxes. He has, again, inconsistent, but sometimes very, very wonderful eye contact, and he can be really engaged, and he's really sweet and affectionate. And these were all these, before I understood autism, because I didn't know the first thing about autism. All I knew, I thought, like, Temple Grandin, that's what I knew. I had watched that movie, which is a wonderful movie with Claire Danes, and I thought, okay, that's autism. Like, that's it. That's all there is to it. It's just, but you don't make eye contact, and you don't like being touched. And here is this kid who always wants to be touched, and he loves everyone in his family, and he's snuggling, and he's happy, and he's giving kisses. And I was like, this is autism, but it is. It's just a different kind of autism. And he just, I was so thrown by that for so long. I did not understand that autism can have many, many different manifestations.
Right. Yeah, I just did a school assembly for a school out in Texas. I did it virtually on Zoom, and I looked up, some terms for them, because they all want to be special ed teachers, and you can be either hypersensitive or hypo, it's one or the other. And I was kind of checking off the boxes myself, like, which one was Robbie, because he was very affectionate. I was the exact same thing. I said, no, he's not autistic, because he is affectionate. He's not in his own world, some of the things they were saying, but he wanted pressure. He needed that sensory input, and he liked to be hugged hard, and he liked to wrestle, and he liked to jump on the trampoline. Like, he wanted his brother to jump on his back and squeeze him, so whereas other kids don't want to be touched, because they're too overly sensitive, and it's too much for them. So yeah, you can't put them in a box, and like you said, it's sporadic. It'll be all over the place, and they don't develop this way. It could
like
be
this.
yeah,
I know.
yeah, all over
I know.
the place.
I know. The thing is, like, I always say, like, with, you know, with even with a neurotypical child, development is never this, right? It's like this. But I say it, and people say, oh, you know, it's like a roller coaster, right? Like raising kids is like a roller coaster. I'm like, okay, maybe, but raising an autistic child, a severely autistic child, at least, is like, it's like Space Mountain. It's like a roller coaster in the dark. You know, it's like, you're like, whoa, which way am I going?
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. I think I am a big music fan. So I think of the world largely in music lyrics. And the one that I always think of in the autism world, or at least in my experience with it with Nick, and this is pretty, I think I've talked to enough autism parents to know this is pretty typical, is the Bruce Springsteen song, One Step Up, which is, you know, the refrain is 1 step up and 2 steps back. And it can be so frustrating for the parents, because that's what it feels like a lot of the times. It's like things are always changing and shifting. Nothing, you're never on solid ground. But it's also, it just feels like you've worked so hard for progress, and with every, you know, inch you fight to gain, then you take a couple steps back, and it's just like, oh gosh, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But
you have to take one day at a time.
You do.
You really do. And you just need to enjoy all the little things that happen each day. And to me, I didn't worry about progress, and I didn't, you know, it's like, because just like you said, he's different every day. Like, you never know what you're going to get. Like, one day it seems like he understands what I'm saying, and then the next day it's like he doesn't understand a word I'm saying. And what causes that, I don't know. You know,
I know.
But it's like, hey, he gave me a hug today. Woohoo! Today was a good day. You know, the next day he was just like a maniac. You know, it's like, okay, let's just erase that day and let's move on to the next day. I think that it's
also you also are, your own progress isn't like this, right? So it's a learning process for me too. And I'm very impressed by you. And when I've seen you talk about your acceptance, like it seems like you came to acceptance really quickly, and you just, you know, your refrain in your Penguin series is just, you know, I love you just the way you are. And I adore my son just the way he is, but I'm not as serene as you seem to be. And I don't know, maybe it took you a while to get there. Maybe it was a struggle that I wasn't privy to, but I know
in the beginning. You're still in the beginning.
Right. I relatively so, and I'm getting closer every day. But there are days when I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm just going to take it day by day, and I'm going to celebrate every victory. And then there are days or months where I'm like, nope, I can't, like, it's just too hard. And I'm not feeling, I want to see the progress, and I just can't help it, you know? So it's definitely not a straight line trajectory for anyone in the household. And I think the thing about autism is that, at least severe autism, which is really all I know, I don't pretend to know much about, you know, higher functioning autism and Asperger's, what used to be called Asperger's, because it's not my world. But, you know, I think it's such a misnomer to talk about autism as though it happens to the individual. Because autism doesn't happen to an individual, it happens to the family. It absolutely does. And I think, you know, well, I don't know if, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but there's a lot of controversy sometimes about, you know, like families showing what's going on. Like, I know there's people who have like blogs where they show videos of their children and having meltdowns, or like doing, you know, stimming or doing different things. And then some people who are, you know, more associated with the higher end of the spectrum get very worked up, and they're like, that's an invasion of your child's privacy, and this is horrible. How can you do that? But what strikes me about that is, I'm like, no, but do you realize too that this is something that's not just happening to this child, this is happening to this parent too. And this is this parent's story to tell as well. Like, this parent has bruises all over her body, right? Like, this parent is being, like, can you imagine any other context in which like an abuse victim would be silenced and told, like, you can't share your story because you have to protect the person who's doing this to you, and you can't. But of course, we understand why. It's because, like, you want to protect the privacy of this person who, you know, has this disability. But this is why I say it's just complicated. It's just much more complex than people, I think, often give it credit for, because it is not something that exists in a vacuum with one person. It does not affect just that child or that person. It affects the whole family. It is the whole family's disorder. you have to take ownership of it together or you'll never make it through.
Right. And
So
it's true. I mean, that's why I started sharing my journey on YouTube, and I was waiting for that kind of backsplash. I didn't get it, but I also disabled comments. Because in the very beginning, someone sent me a very nasty inbox message and said, stop having children and whatever, whatever. It was just awful. And I said, nope, I'm deleting. I'm not allowing any comments because people can be cruel. They can be mean, and they don't understand. They don't understand and they don't understand what the message that I'm trying to put out there, which is what you're saying. It affects the whole family, and don't say it doesn't. And I get kind of annoyed with some of the things that I see online, but
I think what people have to understand is that the parents who are putting this out there are doing it from a place of love. Like I know, so I don't have a blog yet. I think I'm actually just on the cusp of doing a blog and a book, but I did turn my my personal Facebook page into a blog for a month, for the month of Autism Awareness Month last year. And I got a great, response because it was all my friends. So of course, they're all going to be pretty supportive. But I did it precisely for the reason that I wanted people to understand severe autism. I was just like, there's so much spotlight on autism with a capital A, but the spotlight is all shining on, we all know it's a huge spectrum. There's a lot of lip service paid to the fact that it's a very wide spectrum and it's broad, and we all know that, but all the spotlight is on this one part of the spectrum that's just this higher functioning part. And there's very little actual awareness about this other part of the spectrum. So I think what's really happening is that parents are genuinely just trying to spread awareness. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to shine a spotlight on what's really going on with these kids. That's very misunderstood. It's even when you show videos, it's hard for people to understand it unless they live with it. It's so nuanced. It's so outside the realm of what you see in your ordinary, day-to-day life if you don't live in the severe autism world. So I think that's all they're trying to do. They're just trying to say like, hey, this is my kid. And they love their kids. That's what, they're not showing this stuff to make their kids look bad. They adore their kids. They're just trying to show what these kids' reality is so that we can have some awareness and hopefully try to get some more. I know for me, my end game is always, always research and cure, research, treatment, cure. That's all you'll hear me talk about, because I want researchers to pay attention to us. I want them to focus on our part of the spectrum, because we're the part that we need treatment desperately. And I would argue that if we could get one, I would love to have a cure. I don't know if that's in the cards ever, but we got to keep trying,
Yeah, well, they still don't know what causes it. So
exactly. I mean, we got to get to a cause first, and there's probably 40 different causes, I'm sure, but that's step one, right? But we're never going to be able to help these kids if we can't get some research done.
Right. So for me, my focus wasn't on cure. It was just on getting them the help and resources that they need, because after 21, there's no day programs. There's nothing out there. There's nowhere for them to go. People won't take them if they have behaviors or if they have seizures and, that type of thing. And we kept Robbie home all the time, because if we took him out, he would run away. Whatever we tried, it just never worked. And so I started videotaping him and throwing it up on YouTube, and people that I had known for 20 years said, I had no idea that that's what your life was like. Said, because you don't see it, because it's inside my house and nobody comes here. We don't bring him to your house. I don't bring him to your house because he'll break something or he'll pee on your couch or who knows what's going to happen. It's like, no, and it's too chaotic here, to be having people over. It just doesn't work. So they had no idea. So that, as soon as I started getting those comments, I said, well, I need to keep doing this then, because people right in my own life don't even know that's 100%. What it's like. People need to know, and they need to understand, we need help. These kids need somewhere to go. They need programs to go to, people that know what they're doing, people that have the training. They can't just go and just have anybody just watch them either. And to see what the family's life is like also because the whole family needs help. You know, it's like, we need a break. They don't want to be home. We don't want them home all day because they're not happy when they're here. They need somewhere to go, something to do. And it's stressful on the siblings and it's stressful on the parents. And you know, your autistic kid's stressed out. Everybody's stressed out. And they're not sleeping and, you know, at all, you know, and the digestive issues. And let's add the whole thing into the whole pile, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, they need help. Okay, that's it for part 1. Be sure to tune in for part 2. I hope you enjoyed listening and it helped you gain a new perspective. If you're interested in buying our book series, Robbie's World and His Spectrum of Adventures, the link will be in our episode description as well as my Instagram and Facebook pages. If you enjoyed the show and you'd like more content, please be sure to hit that like button, follow us, and don't forget to leave us a great review. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to join us again on our next episode of Spectrum Perspectives.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of today's episode. Be sure to join us again next time to hear the second half of the interview on Spectrum Perspectives.